But I thought we would start by looking at some failures, if that's okay. You see the topic, but you see I have failure in quotation marks. I think our thinking has a lot to say about what we call a failure and how we react. So let's just dive right in. Enrico Fermi, I believe Italian, is a physicist, did his research in the 30s. He submitted a paper to Nature, I think, and he just got butchered in his review. They said, you're too far away from reality, which I would imagine is a hard blow if you're a physician or a physicist. They said, it contains speculations too remote from reality to be of interest to the reader. But he resubmitted it to another one, and it became part of his thesis or work that ended up giving him the Nobel Prize in physics. The next one is an application. A colleague at Psychology in Oslo, he studies grant money. How do people get grant money? And he gave us this one story. There was a research application. They applied for a lot of money, as we all have to do from time to time, I guess. He submitted once, and his submission was denied. However, by accident, it was submitted twice. The same application was submitted 2 times, and it went to different people in the committee. How do you think it went the last time? A bunch of money. Have you guys seen Jim Allison, Breakthrough? It's free on NRK. I hate to be the guy who says do this, but if you want to take away one thing, just go and see that. It's basically about his career in research. He basically came up with a cure for cancer. That was his research. It ended up being a cure for cancer. And you would think he had an easier time getting grant money, publications. He did publish in prestigious places. He had a rough time getting money. And you can just follow every blow that he encounters on his way. Cure for cancer, Nobel Prize in medicine, lots of failure. And let's do one last case. Let's take her on the left. What can we say about this candidate? Okay, so first of all, which 2 things? We're all PhDs, aren't we? Or some postdocs? Anyway, 2 things they all nag about that we should do. What are the 2 things they want us to do? Publish.
And publish.
Get money.
Okay, maybe. Yeah, maybe sometimes they want us to get money. Publish. There's another big one though, isn't it?
Finish on time.
Finish on time. Publish. Finish on time. So if publishing and finishing on time is important, what do we say about this place? It's an institute. Most people spend 6 years on their PhD. The norm, as we all know, is 3 years. I get reminded every day. 3 years, Henrik. 3 years. And the bosses, they embrace temporary employment, slow PhDs, few articles. The principal says they kind of look bad on the metrics that we all get measured by, right? They look bad. There's only one problem though, and you may be familiar with this place. They have received the Nobel Prize, and they are cutting edge. I'm talking about the Moser up in Trondheim, the Kavli Institute, cutting edge research. I guess my point is, if you want to do everything, you have a rough time. If you want to submit on time, if you want to do cutting edge things, it's going to be hard. And I'm sure you cannot do any of this without experiencing failure along the way. So, I thought we would have a discussion about this today. How can we handle these things in science if we can all agree that these are the things that we will face, right? Okay. Because luckily there are some things that we can do to make it easier for ourselves. But the problem is it's hard, and if we don't take responsibility for ourselves, it can be miserable to be a PhD student or a postdoc. As many of you know, I assume. So whenever I worked with a performer who's having a hard time, because they all do, nobody comes dancing into my office with good news, if you're a psychologist. Everyone comes because they face challenges. And I assume maybe some of you have showed up here because you realized, okay, this is going to be a challenge. Whenever I do, I start like this. I ask the person I'm working with to draw a circle. In the middle, I draw like this, and that's actually how I draw because I can't draw. And that's you. Inside the circle are the things that you can control. And that's sometimes part of the problem, but it's very often things from the outside, things that you cannot control. And maybe combined with yourself as a person, you have a hard time because of something external, something that's happened. So, just so I don't stand here talking all the time, do you guys want to just maybe give me some ideas of what you can face from the outside, external forces creating problems for you as part of a PhD? So this can be a metaphor, the bad weather can be a metaphor for trouble, but I've actually also worked with athletes who have a hard time with the weather. They get worried. And I don't know if maybe if you're doing research on farming, etc., it might be a factor, but for me it's not a factor, the weather. But it's in the present. Sometimes there are things in the present. You have a timeline here. Many times it's things that have happened in the past, like something involved with other people, something people said to you, some criticism you received maybe. I think we're getting closer to what we may experience in academia now. Handling other people's opinions. And the future, especially with COVID. How do we plan? So what's going to happen next year? Will I submit on time? Will I have enough funding? These are the things that make us human. That's the separation between us and many animals. We can stay up at night, think about these things. That's how we have done kind of well, but it's also why we have problems. So that's what I thought we would spend some time on now. What can we do to handle challenges? And what can we do to prepare before they happen? And when, what's the nice term? When shit hits the fan? That's not the nice one. What can we do when we're in the middle of something? Let's say we have gotten some criticism or a really bad review or some things that we think is challenging. What can we do when it's going on? And after the war zone picture here, what can we do after stuff has gone not according to plan? That's what I thought we would do. If I were to select one, when I work with especially performers, and I mean, I don't know you guys, but you tend to have a certain profile. I mean, you tend to be sort of high achievers. You tend to be highly motivated. So if I were to pick one that I think is the most important if you want to do well in a competitive field, I would definitely pick be prepared. It's like in the military. You don't practice war when it's war. You practice when it's peacetime. The Olympics are coming up in 100 days for the winter. They don't train now. They've trained, and the Olympics are held every 4th year. They train for 4 years or even more. 10 years is average. So be prepared. And I thought we would spend a little bit of time discussing how can we prepare for the challenges that typically come up in academia. And I want to talk about goal setting and planning, but before that, I think the values that we have are really important. Like I said, you guys tend to have a profile. You tend to be high achievers, and by that I mean you tend to be on average intelligent. You tend to be highly motivated. You tend to really care about your work. It's not like you just apply, you go to your job place from 8 to 4, you go home, you think about everything else. You guys tend to put a lot of pride in your project. It's almost part of your identity, right? And what happens in a lot of cases is that you get a certain mindset. How many here are familiar with the terms fixed mindset and growth mindset? Half a person, as a half a hand. If you have a fixed mindset, you tend to have thoughts along the line of I am good at what I do, and what I do says something about me. So it's very fixed. You know what I mean? Here are some quotes from articles about these people. We all have this tendency. You tend to get angry when you get feedback if it's negative. And the extreme version is truly smart people do not need to try hard. That's the fixed mindset. So you think that you either are or you are not something. Smart, successful, anything. And you tend to have values along the line of recognition, glory. If you're very externally motivated in research, you're going to have a hell of a time. What's the mode number of citations that an article gets? The most common number of citations? 0. Yeah. Your mother reads it. Hopefully we'll all publish something that more people read. But the mode is 0, right? So if you're very along the lines of fixed mindset, glory, recognition, you're going to have a really hard time. So that's values. On the other side, you have the growth mindset. Let's say you're a little bit less concerned with the glory and you're more concerned with, I want to grow as much as possible. I want to learn as much as possible. In theory, you can have no failure, just learning. That's in theory. No human being can be like that. Nobody's perfect. And I'm not even sure it's perfect. But your values has a lot to say for how you handle criticism. There's one study, just to give you guys an example. Fifth graders in math. Those who were more along the lines of a fixed mindset were compared with those along the lines of growth mindset. And when math problems got hard, that's the interesting part, right? Everyone can do well when things are easy, everything's going well, no problem. When it got hard, the fixed mindset pupils tend to give up and perform more poorly, as opposed to the growth mindset ones, those who embrace a challenge, blah, blah, blah. And that's one thing we can control. How we think. I'm not saying it's going to come easy. These are things that I work with people on for a long time. But how you think is actually something you can affect. The next thing I would say is that it really helps, even if COVID strikes and all your plans are shredded to pieces, you're way better off if you have goals and plans than without. That's my opinion. A typical conversation, let's say you're humble, you have a growth mindset, a typical conversation in academia is something like this. Hey, I do research on this. Some other person, oh, you do that? Here, you should do this, you should read this, you should do these analysis, you should look into this, I have ideas for you, you should talk to him. If you don't have any idea of what your project is, your timeline, you'll be eaten up. And another thing, when I ask, do you have goals? People say yes. If there's an athlete, I ask them, what's your goal? I want to compete in the Olympics. Okay, cool. What other goals do you have? None. Well, how are you going to get there? I don't know. Well, you might want to succeed in the Olympic qualification, right? Yeah, that's a good idea. If I ask an academic, yeah, I want to publish 3 articles for my thesis. How are you going to get there? A little bit more vague. And I hope you guys have these things sorted. But what I spend a lot of time with is try to do backwards planning, backwards engineering, I guess it's called. Going from what's your end goal, break it down, break it down, break it down. Because when COVID comes, and as we'll see later, when the failure comes, you have something to go back to. It's way better to have something to keep you centered, to keep you focused, so that you can know, okay, this thing, that won't work. I've had to do this due to COVID myself. When COVID came and my data collection was postponed, I had one aspect that I couldn't do. And it's way better to know this. I can't do this. I knew I had this plan. If you have no plan, no goals, everyone can come and affect your plans and you don't know where you are. If you know where you are, it's going to take way more to put you off. The burnouts, the really, really serious stress, comes when you've lost your sense of control. So that was before. Let's move on to the stuff that goes on during the setbacks. I always like to compare things to sport. I guess that's a damage from my piece of work. I mean, I always, what sport is this? If I were to call academia a sport, I would definitely have to say, because we all do this, like, oh, it's a PhD, it's like a marathon. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It takes a long time. We all do this, right? I would say we have certain sports that we call jury sports. Ski jumping and figure skating. And these are frowned upon. Why? Because it's so subjective. Because you get grades from a human being. If Karsten Warholm or Jakob Ingebrigtsen run the 400 meter, the 1500 meter in so much time, we know it's correct. It's objective. We love that. This stuff, vague. And there's been a ton of corruption in these sports. The judges, they bribe the judges. These things are super objective compared to academia. When you submit a paper, it's this subjective times 10 or 100. So I thought we'd do that as a case. I'll say science is an extreme jury sport. You may know this meme. How many here have gotten reviews? How many here have gotten some harsh criticism or criticize? I thought I would share 2 pieces of review that I've received that will hopefully illustrate what I'm talking about. So here's the first. This journal was an applied sport journal, so they had these factors: importance of topic, contribution, applied focus, analysis, blah, blah, blah. Here's reviewer 1. And I may add, I had spent 5 years on this project and I had some high hopes. Marginal, Poor. This was my first review. And I'm like right down in the basement. However, here's number 2. I mean, I don't know who's right. Well, all I know is that it was a split decision and the editor liked our work, so we ended up getting it published in a decent journal. So, I guess my point is, opinion is not the same as quality. And this is an image from my book. By the way, I have some copies with me if you guys want to look at it. I don't have too high hopes there. It's a book about challenges. Mainly, we're using the sports context. What I used to say is that if you don't have a filter, you're not going to survive in sports. You'll have coaches saying mean things. And I'll say the same is true in academia. If you just let everything in, everything people have to say, you won't know who you are, and you'll feel bad about yourself. So you need a filter. So let's do a case. I'll show you one more review. We submitted 3 months and 25 days or something later, we get this. And the important part is this. See reasons? There are no reasons. I clicked on it. There was nothing. The overall quality of the manuscript is below the standards. Can you please help me? How do I work from there? So, I've created this system. And I already know you don't mind this. You like this. You have to, in my view, have a filter if you want to survive academia. So I've created this system that you can sort the review information or criticism you get into 3. You have garbage. That's no information. You have stuff that you can use in the short term. And you have stuff you can use in the longer term. Let me illustrate. Because the first review, we got some more stuff. They didn't just say, this is good or bad. So the first one, yeah, that's garbage. I don't know what to do. So we tried another journal, and I'm happy to announce I'm working on revisions this week. Resubmitting, as long as we resubmit, the deadline is on Sunday, I'm fairly sure we'll get it published in a journal that's just as good. Glad I got to share that with you. So the first one, they found some design issue. It was a confounding variable. So I can't really fix that after the data collection. However, I can think about it the next time because it was a good point, right? And sometimes when you get harsh criticism, there's a point in there. So if you just say, oh no, that's criticism, you lose a lot of information. However, it may not be in the short term, it may be longer term. So that's the long term. This is almost like the old betting, like home victory, draw, away victory. So here's an away victory. Remember that the next time. Sometimes it's both. We had a small sample. They said we had underpowered analyses. I should remember that for the next time. However, we can tweak the analysis. We can make some different choices, which we did, and I hope they're happy now.
Can I have one question?
Yeah, sure.
So,
I think that's very human to obsess, and I also think talking to someone or writing can help. First, I mean, research shows that just writing about your problems make you more at ease. Just writing about it. And also, you can also do this thing like where you have your alternatives or options, like, okay, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, and then you can do pros and cons, right? So this option has these pros, these cons, these. Sometimes makes it easier, but it's a challenge, I know. And the last one, yeah, we had some literature we didn't see. So they actually sent us some citations or references, which I read, and some of them are bad, but I'm going to use them anyway to please them. And some of them are good. You know this game, right? It's a game. You have to please the reviewers if you want to publish. So that's my filtering system. Just an idea. After, I would say the worst thing is to rush into something when you've gotten some bad news. To just go and rush. So take a little bit of time. And especially if you have a tendency to obsess, I really recommend writing. Another thing, in addition to the one we discussed previously, is to do an evaluation in terms of what was positive, what was negative. A lot of times, I've found it all sounds purely negative when it comes. When people say something harsh, it's very easy to think, oh, it's all bad. Like that first review I had. It looks really, really harsh. But what if that one little thing they like about your work is the most important? And in many cases, you can discover it's actually some positives in there as well. So there's a good time to do that. It's a really good time to revisit your goals and maybe revise. That's why I think it's better to have goals and plans than to don't have them, because it makes it so much easier. You can go back. Okay, what was my plan here originally and what were my goals? The goals doesn't change. They don't change nearly as much as the planning, like the more detailed stuff. Very often you can keep your research question or some of your hypotheses, but you may have to change some things going there, right? And I think that was my intention here, to share those things. I think you need to have a shelter, you need a filter, you need to have some strategies to handle things from the outside. It can be stuff going on right now. Very often it's things that has happened, and it can be things in the future as well. So thank you for your attention, and I hope we can have some Q&A now and some discussion.